Hello, this is David Mandell, host of the podcast. Thanks for joining us. As you likely know, at this point, we're in the middle of our summer 2025 Rewind series. And as you probably have heard, our podcast is on an academic calendar. So we're coming out with new episodes every 2 weeks from basically September to June. And then we take the summer off in terms of new episodes. I'm recording a lot for the next season, which will be season 6, starting up in September. And what we do in the summer is every 2 weeks, we're still coming out with content. But what we're doing is I'm going back to a season, not the last one that just finished, but 2 back or 3 back, and looking for episodes I think are evergreen, that are just as valuable today as when they originally came out, and highlighting those. And so today we've got an episode with a plastic surgeon in Boston at Harvard. In Harvard Medical School. And it's a pretty interesting one because he talks about how he's had to develop his own profit and loss and what he's learned about that, even though he's at an academic institution. He's had to learn how to, and teaches other fellows how to think about their P&L and developing their business and their practice and making it profitable. He also talks significantly about what it's like to be in an institution and how to be a good citizen and be part of that. So this is Dr. Richard Bartlett, and the topic is understanding one's P&L and being good citizen or good practice citizen. So I think it'll be very interesting whether you're on the entrepreneurial side and you're interested in that, the P&L side, or you're part of an institution and want to get some advice from a professor who's been doing it a long time. This was originally in season 3, episode 11, and I hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to the Wealth Planning for the Modern Physician podcast, where we talk to doctors like you about their real-world lessons in financial matters and hear from industry experts who can impact your personal bottom line. The host of our podcast is David Mandell. David is an attorney, OJM Group partner, and author of more than a dozen books on wealth planning for physicians. Now, let's turn the mic over to David.
Hello, this is David Mandell, host of the podcast. I'm excited about today's guest, a well-accomplished surgeon, someone I've been able to know and work with for a number of years, and I'm sure we'll have a good discussion. So let me tell you about Richard Bartlett, and then we will bring him on. Richard Bartlett, MD, is a board-certified plastic surgeon in practice for over 30 years. He has been on the teaching faculty of the University of Pennsylvania, New York University, and the Harvard Medical School. He is also a frequent lecturer and author of numerous publications in peer-reviewed journals. He trained at Jefferson Medical College and later at NYU, where he completed a prestigious plastic surgery residency and craniofacial and microsurgery fellowships. Former appointments as Associate Chief of Plastic Surgery at Boston Children's Hospital and Associate Director of the Craniofacial and Cleft Lip Palate Program consolidated his reputation for providing quality care that delivers exemplary results even for the most challenging cases. So with that, Richard, welcome to the program.
Thanks, David. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. And for those listening to the podcast, to listen to us, but not see us, which is fun.
Right.
So let's start at the beginning, as I like to. Where'd you grow up? What got you interested in becoming a physician, and how'd you end up in plastic surgery?
Well, I grew up in Pennsylvania in Bucks County, which is a suburb of Philadelphia, and middle-class community, and had a great childhood and good schools. And, I was always interested in science in some way. And I had some exposure to physicians when I got into junior high school and high school. And, it sort of piqued my interest a little bit. And then I was a Boy Scout. And when I became an Eagle Scout, part of the program was that you could spend a day with someone who was in the field you wanted to go into. So I got to spend the day with a local general surgeon. And, I liked everything I saw. It seemed exciting. It was also physical. He did things with his hands. And so that really appealed to me. And so I sort of got that into my mind that that's what I wanted to do. And, when you're interested in medicine, once you go down that path, someone's telling you what you're going to do every 4 years.
Right.
So, you know, uh, it's you come out the other end and you're a doctor.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's certainly, we all know, extremely challenging, and then nobody would say easy, but it at least is straightforward.
Right.
Meaning you don't meander around saying, "Hey, if I want to be a film producer," it's not really so easy to figure out what the right angle is to get that experience. At least in medicine, hey, medical school, internship, residency, fellowship, it's kind of laid out for you.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
not an easy path. So, okay, so as you were getting your MD, and then in residency and fellowship, so you were making, peanuts, but something. What was your exposure to business, finance, investing, wealth planning, the kind of things that you and I have talked about over the years, and that this podcast is about? Was this on a sliding scale? Were you not interested in that, or kind of like, I'm just going to do the medicine, I'll wait for that when I finally make some money? Or were you reading the Wall Street Journal while in med school, and really interested in that? Where were you on that spectrum?
So I mean, my father was a businessman. He was in
Okay.
the insurance industry, and he would talk to me a little bit once in a while about investments, but not in a way that really piqued my interest.
Yeah.
And I'm that I was in training in the 70s and 80s in college and med school, and then residency in the 80s. And so any sort of financial orientation in medical school just did not exist.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't on my radar screen. My undergraduate degree is in bioengineering. And when you're getting to the end of your engineering training, you have to do some projects and do some feasibility studies. And so you get some of that practical decision making into your mind. But well into my general surgery residency and probably even into my plastic surgery residency, I sort of figured that finances would take care of themselves,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
continue.
no, I just really did not know anything. But part of that was uh, sort of ignorance on my part. And I just didn't come up in that, with that kind of those issues on my mind.
Well, I think part of it, in some ways, has not changed a lot. I mean, you could tell me how Harvard does it, but they're still not, I don't think, enough. And we're always trying to press fellowship programs, residency programs to do a day on business, to do a 1 day out of 365 on finance, just so docs have a little bit more training. On the other hand, you know, when you were doing it, just financial information in general wasn't as available. There was no internet, right? I mean, you
Mm.
literally had to, watch Rukeyser Wall Street show on,
Right,
on a Sunday night to understand
right,
what's going on, or actually get the physical Wall Street Journal delivered to you, or go to the library and get it.
sure.
Whereas now, obviously, I mean, it's the other end of the spectrum. There's too much information. There's so much noise. People get overwhelmed. Maybe somewhere in the sweet spot was the 90s when I was in grad school, where there was enough information, but not, not too much. But yeah, I think it's still a challenge for folks. And it's the reason we do some speaking to fellowship programs and residency programs, to give them some exposure, so they, try to avoid mistakes, at least in the early end, right?
It is
That's,
a little better now on our society level, the American
yeah.
Society of Plastic Surgeons, and I know that you've spoken
Mhm.
at their meeting on numerous occasions, and they have a senior residents conference where they try to give the graduating residents some orientation and it's good, it's valuable. You could say it's a little too late,
Yeah.
but they do get some of that.
Yeah.
And as you were saying, so the cons, there's too much information nowadays. The pros, it's easy to get it,
Right.
and they're fast learners. All these residents are very, very bright young people, and so they pick it up very quickly. But when I'm so the nature of the teaching that I do right now is that I have a resident standing across the operating room table from me for 4 hours at a time, 8 hours in a day. And so we talk a lot.
Yeah.
And the conversation is all over the place. It's, are you married? Do you have a dog?
Right.
But sometimes it actually they know that I'm in private practice. And so they sort of want to pick my brain about
Yeah.
how things work. And you know what, I will occasionally, even with the sophistication of these new residents, I'll occasionally say, do you know what a P&L is?
Right.
And many times they don't,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, and that's like saying, do you know what a bank account is? It's
Well, eventually, as you're in
yeah,
business, yeah, that's right. But back to when you were on the other side of that table, you probably didn't know either, as we were saying.
oh, absolutely not,
Yeah.
absolutely not. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So let's go back to that, and we're gonna get up to where we are today. But let's think about back when you were in fellowship, from a career point of view, not so much a financial or investing point of view. How did you make the decision on what job you took first? It sounds like you were in academics almost from the beginning, and just give us a little sense of your thinking as you came out of training in the beginning in terms of.
So, plastic surgery is a big field. And people
Yeah.
develop, interest in one area or another. And my main interest at that time was in cleft lip and palate, craniofacial, basically congenital malformations in the head and neck area. And those are very specialized problems, and you have to be at a pretty large place with, that can draw those patients. And so looked at academic jobs. I looked at academic jobs in Philadelphia, New York, but ultimately ended up coming up to the main reason that I came to Boston was to work at Children's Hospital in craniofacial and cleft lip and palate. Um, but one of the things that was attractive about the job that I took was that in the practice model, it was a big group. It was the Brigham Surgical Group that I was in. There were hundreds of surgeons, but the business manager would sit down with you and show you how the system worked. And basically, you had reports periodically while you were in practice on what you were earning, what your expenses were. It was all very transparent. So, there were jobs that I looked at where you had a salary, and next year they'd tell you if the salary was going to change or not, but you had no idea whether you were really gaining any traction in terms of the economics of your practice. So it appealed to me to be in a system where I could see how things were working. And you took personal responsibility. If you wanted a $100,000 laser, that's fine, but it's coming out of your
Right.
kitty. And so I like that. Not everybody cares about that, but I like that part of it. And I think that even the academic people that I know still like it, or like having a system like that, because it does, I don't know, it gives you some peace of mind that, everything's fair. But so that's why I came to Boston to work in that job, doing that kind of surgery. And I thought it was a good job that paid me fairly. Let's
Yeah.
put it this way. Yeah.
Well, I think, it's interesting you bring that up, but I think there's a couple other real benefits to it. One other is it kind of trains you, if you ever want to go into private practice, to think in terms of, as you're just saying, P&L, right? Because you get a sense of what you're earning and what overhead is attributed to you. And, you know, are you profitable and how profitable? Well, if it's just a black box and it's like you do all this work and we give you a salary, you might not know that, which
Yeah.
I could see it from their point of view. Well, it might not give you the confidence to go out and leave on your own. Whereas this system, I think it sounds like you would know, have a pretty good sense. Obviously it's going to be different overhead if you do your own private practice versus the academic, but at least you'd be knowing, okay, I'm generating this kind of income and this is sort of my overhead, the way it's being done now. And I understand my profitability. So that transparency is key. And the other piece of it, I think, is that, um, and I don't know if this came up for you or not, but it gives you more knowledge is more power, even if you end up staying in that situation. I mean, that you have some there's negotiation power to get paid more, or get some more equipment, as you were mentioning, or another staff person, or more OR time, whatever it is, that if you have a sense of what you're worth, quote unquote, in terms of bottom line profit, I would think that would give some a good um, comfort level as well to your kind of security and what you could get out of it. Is that true as well? Do you think?
Well, not only that, I make this point to the residents now that it doesn't matter whether you're in private practice or whether you're full-time academic position, you still have to balance the books.
Right.
If you're the chief of a division or a department, you need to know these things. Your staff would like to have a raise periodically.
Right.
You have to be able to hire people. You need to be able to pay your bills.
Right.
You're not going to be the most popular department in the hospital if you're chronically running a deficit.
Right.
And so to understand, I think these principles of just financial management,
Yeah.
both personal and professional, are good first principles to having a controlled, pretty predictable life.
Yeah.
Both, and so I think it serves you. I agree with what you just said 100%, that it empowers you,
Yeah.
and that you can be empowered whether you're writing a check to yourself at the end of each month or whether the university is.
Right.
It's good to know these things.
Yeah, and you even mentioned there. I think you kind of let it slip there, but I think it's true. It even translates into your personal life. Meaning, do you run your own household profitably? I know a lot of docs who make a bunch of money and they're like, I don't know where the money goes.
Right.
Now, hopefully the spouse does, or somebody does. But
Yeah.
sometimes, we're not. Obviously, we help clients with a lot of like bigger picture wealth management, building their wealth, reducing taxes, et cetera. But sometimes, we have to, and sometimes we even refer them to somebody who can, an accountant that can get a better handle on, where is the money going as it comes in. And if you have some discipline in that in a business or a practice or even an academic environment, you're probably going to do a better job of it in household finances too.
Right. Right.
So I
Yeah, for
think,
sure. I mean, I had a one of the things that I'll talk to the residents about when they come to my actual office,
yeah,
I tell them I am a blank slate. You can ask me any question you want. I'll show you my bookkeeping.
well,
I will show you the forms we use, whatever, just that it's here for you to learn.
yeah,
But they one thing that I will bring up with them is that when you do your billing,
yeah,
you have to collect the money. And one parameter you can look at to see how well your billing is going is the age of your accounts receivable.
yeah,
And it's a principle that, if you let those accounts receivable age
yeah,
too long, your ability to collect on those bills goes down significantly.
right.
I had a colleague whose wife was in a radiology practice, and the age of their accounts receivable was 12 months, which
Yes.
they were never going to get that money. They were never going to collect that money. So it's just a matter of, things like that
Yeah.
applied to your everyday discipline of running your practice helps you to just keep the boat afloat.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And it's a point well made. So, how did you? It sounded like for a long time, and you can give us a perspective on it. You were kind of full time academic, even with this great business model that Children's or Brigham, however, whoever the legal entity was, allowed this kind of transparency. But eventually, you made a move to a private practice, um, but kept your appointments at Harvard. You still do the teaching, et cetera. So, when did that come up first in your mind, and then and as hey, this is something I might want to do, and then when did you decide to make the move, and how did you execute it?
So I was in well, I was full-time academic for about 15 years.
Uh-huh.
And I had decided at some point that I wanted to have my own office, wanted to control, you know, what I was doing in my practice to a greater degree. It really had more to do with control. And I had good relationships with my colleagues in the academic departments. And so basically I was able to go into private practice and still operate in the same hospitals and still do the same type of work. So if you looked at my um, case profile from the week before I went into practice
Right.
or private practice and the week after, it would look similar. So that was the ability to do that, um, and that pick up stakes and move to another city or whatever was appealing to me at that age. Um, and um, I had some experience because during my time as a full-time academic uh, appointment, I was instrumental in setting up a new foundation at Children's Hospital, a plastic surgery foundation that employed physicians. And when we did that, we started from scratch. And so I learned about benefit plans and defined benefit pensions and defined contribution pensions and being HR and being compliant with
Right.
regulatory agencies. And so that was a great cutting my teeth with setting up that foundation was a great preparation for going into private practice because these things are the same. You need a lawyer, you need an accountant, you need a bookkeeping system. And so it was a relatively smooth transition. And I'm happy to say that it was a relatively collegial
Yeah.
transition as well. That doesn't always happen. But and I was able to still continue to teach, which it's always been important to me. It's what I enjoy the most in the practice.
Yeah.
Uh, but I enjoy it more now than I'm the age I'm at, because I get to talk to all these bright young people. It's rejuvenating for me, and so again, it was a pretty smooth transition, and I was able to do what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that sounds like very fortunate. I think that you kind of, I mean, it's funny because some of the real successful private practices that we've talked to, and so even the folks on this podcast that talk about the word private demics, but they really have come in from the other way. They have a large enough private practice that they can have a fellowship program and they can get some grant money. They can do that. I mean, you're at Harvard, so you're at, one of the top institutions, but able to shift it so you have more control in your private practice, but keep the things that people, I think, want often from academics, which is teaching or doing something very specific that you said you couldn't get the patient base if you were just, in any X town. You just wouldn't be able to have that many cases of that um, complexity, what have you. So um, I haven't heard this story that you're talking about as much. So I think it is. I'm not saying it's unique, but the fact that you did it successfully and had a good transition, kept being able to even work at the same hospitals and teach the same. I think it's certainly a beneficial.
Well, I think part of it is just, and this is good advice for anyone who, in any situation, I think being a good citizen,
Yeah,
and I think that counts for a lot. It still does.
yeah,
And serving on committees and being collegial and taking other people's phone calls and
right,
and everybody appreciates teaching. I had not heard that term before, private demics,
yeah,
but
yep,
it's pretty clever and it's interesting uh, that so I was full-time academic and I got my paycheck from the academic department for 15 years and I've been in private practice for 16 years. I've won 3 teaching awards through the Harvard residency program. I won all 3 of those teaching awards after I was in private practice.
yeah,
So those guys in private practice that were talking to you about private demics, it's true. You can do an awful lot. You can do all that citizenship activity on the national level or on the local level with your regional societies, and I'm very proud to be a member of my professional society, and I'm very proud of the level of commitment and ethics and um, that my colleagues have.
Yeah.
And that goes both ways, I think, when you're trying to be a good member of the club.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, listen, it happens. You're dealing with people, and especially with hospitals and institutions and, Harvard and big egos. And I spent enough time there to know, if people like you and you do things that help the group, then when it's time for you to get, say, hey, listen, I'd like to carve out something that maybe is a little unique, people are going to be more open to it. Versus if you're, the kind of person that people just like, shake their heads, they have to deal with, but they're talented. So you have to deal with them. We all have those kind of people. When it comes down to like, hey, can we give this guy a break or not? They're not going to get the same
Right.
benefit. Just
Right.
the way it works,
Yeah.
in anything, in sports or anything else. So now let's go back to one of the questions I asked at the beginning, which is in your fellowship, in your residency, your father helped, it would explain a little about, P&L or some business things to you, but personal finance wasn't really where your head was at. You figured it would work out eventually. Now
Yeah.
let's sort of look back, 30 years in practice. You've been using some professionals. Obviously, we work with you at OJM. Uh, how did you manage financial decisions? Did you have advisors right from the beginning? Did you kind of do some things, try to be your own advisor? And if so, how did that go? Did you have you kind of used the same people over time? What do you look for in advisors? What advice would you give to that fellow across the OR with you about, hey, how did you find a good, accountant or a good wealth manager? Give us a little bit of what you've learned in your career from coming from a place
Well,
where,
I first learned from, I was telling you that the business manager of that large group that I originally went into would
yeah,
sit down with you and go over things, and then they would send you, or they'd make sure you got your P&L, on a regular basis. But I also learned about, so we were enrolled in a 403B, which is
yep,
the nonprofit version of a 401k.
yep,
And, there were menus of mutual funds that you could invest in. And they didn't have a lot of information for the doctors about that. But, I just started reading, I don't think it even exists anymore, but I started reading Money Magazine.
Money Magazine.
And the advice in there, I mean, it's the same article. Probably the article that I read 28 years ago. You see a similar article periodically in the Wall Street Journal or whatever about, the basics of investing, don't sell when the market's down, and, have a core of sort of index funds and things like that. And, but one of the things that Money Magazine recommended is you just start reading some sort of source of information. It could be the business section of the New York Times, or it could be the Wall Street Journal, and sooner or later you will achieve. Now, I don't have a business degree,
Right.
and the people with MBAs could run rings around me, but again, when I'm speaking to the younger people around the hospital, I think they think I have some expertise in these things. Part of it is if you live long enough, you do learn a few lessons.
Right.
But then running your own business, you sure learn a few lessons. And I don't have any secret sauce for choosing the right advisor.
Right.
And nowadays, when you choose somebody, so for instance, I have a bookkeeper right now that never comes to the office. Everything gets downloaded electronically from my bank account, and it goes in. I've seen this person once. The bookkeeper used to come twice a month to the office and sit at one of the desks and put things into QuickBooks. So I think that if you start with many times your local banker can give you some advice. I think that, like any other personal relationship, that if someone, I say this to patients in terms of choosing their doctor, if you feel a rapport with the doctor, they're answering your questions and you can understand the answers,
Right.
then that's probably an okay person to work with. And if they're not, if that you don't feel that, then move on.
Right.
Go to somebody else. So But I don't think it's that hard. Don't as long as you're not too ambitious or greedy or trying to do too much too early. I think all the things that every older physician used to tell younger physicians going into practice, keep your overhead down. And it's still not bad advice.
Yeah.
Do things in a logical way. I think that our societies do give some, or I think having like the senior residence conference is a helpful thing.
Yeah.
I think that, I in the Boston area, I have a lot of graduates who will call me, and I just had someone today that wanted to get malpractice insurance for one of their physician assistants that they just hired, and I'll send them to someone that I know. So
Yeah.
it's sort of a network that, you're always a member of the club.
Mhm.
Um, get emails all the time. Do you know someone who can do this or that? So,
Awesome.
um,
Yeah, I think that's the benefit of teaching, and you have this generation of people coming up, and certainly, you know this, Richard, but anytime they want to talk to us or get any of our books, they're all free for any of the docs that get referred to us. So,
right.
um, yeah, I think that makes sense. Um, have have your one question on that, and then we could kind of wrap up with my kind of question I ask a lot of docs at the end, but with consolidation going on in the field, some of these investment firms, private equity firms, et cetera, they've done it in other specialties. They're starting to do it in some in plastic surgery areas. Have you seen that at all? Have any of your former trainees called you up and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about I've been approached, and maybe I might consider going into this platform." Is that something that's come across your radar?
Yes, it has. As a matter of fact, one of my longtime colleagues recently sold his practice um, to a. It's actually it's private equity, but it's private equity linked to an existing medical practice.
Yeah, that's typical.
And so I've talked to him about this, and I've been learning because
Yeah.
I couldn't understand why private equity would want to own a medical practice.
Mhm.
But there is some logic to it, particularly if the medical practice has aspects to it that make income other than what the doctor's doing. So I think that, and I see this in some of I have another colleague who a couple of years ago in mid-career went back to school and got an MBA. And I think he learned some of these things when he got his MBA because he's setting up a practice now that has a lot of ancillary services in it.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing that would be attractive to someone else because, if it's one doctor, and something happens to the doctor or he
Right.
decides not to work hard anymore, what are you buying? And so, I'm learning these things. No one has really approached me about it so far, and I'm pretty conservative, so I don't have a lot of some of the ancillary services that other practices have. But I think if you're aware of it, maybe you guide some of your decision making, even in terms of the name of your practice, the branding that you do, and maybe some of the physician extenders themselves. I think if you cultivate that, you're going to be more attractive to private equity. Plastic surgery practices tend to be small compared to other practices.
Yeah.
Um, but I know it is coming. As a matter of fact, our fall meeting in the exhibit hall, where all the vendors are, there was a private equity group there with
Yeah.
a booth.
Yeah, it's coming because we've seen it at OJM. Obviously, we have docs in every specialty, and we saw it in pain management maybe 12 years ago. We seen it in ophthalmology very significantly, derm, orthopedics. It's really, and some of the other guests, anyone listening who's a regular listener to this podcast, we've had some attorneys on talking about M&A. We've talked to a couple of surgeons. with their investment partner or the management company after they've done a transaction. So I just wanted to get your perspective. I know you are a conservative. I know you're up at Harvard, and I just wanted to curious if if it's gotten your way. And it sounds like at least for some of your colleagues, it's coming. So yeah, I think it's good for you to keep your ear to the ground and understand it because as we've talked about every time, every person, the investment bankers, the lawyers, even if you don't do a transaction, but you learn how to make your practice more efficient and more, better EBITDA, there's a financial
Yeah.
word, you're better off. So, there are things you can learn even if you say, hey, I never want to go down that road.
Right. No, it's in the wind for
Yeah.
sure. It's in the
Yeah.
wind. Yeah.
In the win. I like that. That's great. Okay. So last question. Um, you obviously train these young surgeons today. What's the one thing, and you can use two if you want, but that you would give them advice that you would give them when it comes to either finances or investing or wealth management or even business slash career? Share that with us.
For finances and wealth management, I think that I would tell them they have to become educated on these subjects if they have no background in it to begin with.
Yeah.
Um, it's part of running, as I said before, not only a good business, but running a good life,
Yeah.
to be somewhat organized. Um, I think that the centerpiece of a lot of practices is the bookkeeping. And, they should at least learn to read some of the statements so they know what's going on, what's coming in, what's going out. And, but all this goes hand in glove with uh, making good decisions for yourself that many times I've heard this for years and years that residents are focusing on their starting salary. And I tell them that's might be the least important aspect of the position you look at. And I will cite some practices that I say, when I was coming out of my training, if they had offered me a job with no income, I would have taken it because the upside was so good. Now, not everybody, when I finished my residency, I had 4 children. And so I did need a paycheck sooner or
Yeah.
later. So some people are a little more flexible in terms of their personal overhead, but choose, make good decisions, make choose, do something that you like doing. If you like doing microsurgery, then don't go into a cosmetic surgery practice. And I think that's one of the challenges, and especially for older residents because they get into their mid 30s and they're so nervous about making the right decision. They don't want to make the wrong decision. And so just to give them some perspective, I say, that you're every you're in such a great situation. You're one of the brightest people in your generation. You have this degree from, the ones at Harvard are going to have a Harvard diploma on the wall. I said, success is not in doubt. Success is not in doubt. You might move, you might change jobs, but these are small aspects to a life. Make good decisions, go in with partners that you respect that are ethical. Choose to do something you like to do so you'll have a smile on your face when you go to work each day. You know, um, Take enough vacation,
Yeah.
not a bad idea to live where your wife wants to live.
Yeah. Heard that one before. Um,
Yeah, right.
so you said a lot of good things, but as we conclude, I want to kind of point out one actually. A lot of great advice there, but I think especially for the young docs and even for those changing jobs early on, because a lot of people do change jobs. I'm not sure how the numbers are in plastics, but across medicine, there's a lot of people who change jobs in the first 5 years, and it is exactly right. I think back on my career, the starting salary of my first job had to be the least important factor for the success of my career. Yeah, I'm not saying it wasn't important to pay bills, right? You need
Right,
some
right.
income, and you had 4 kids. I didn't have any, so you know, if you could make it work, then anybody could. But I think I've mentioned this before in passing, and at some point be coming out with it, but I'm working with a startup with two orthopedic surgeons that is kind of hoping to consolidate information and provide good value to people taking their first job or changing jobs, kind of a consulting service along with a law firm that we're working with. And we want people to have good information to make good decisions, but they're like, people are so worried about making the best decision. There is no best decision. You go with the best information you can, and then, you do the best you can. But, one of the things that we're developing is, some financial models that are be easy to use to show exactly what you were saying, which is that one job may have a higher initial salary, but the upside of the other, with some, RVU, expectations or, reasonable assumptions overtakes it over. And we're trying to be able to show people, like one of the things we do learn in MBAs, in an MBA program is, present value and future cash flows, and help make that decision in a very easy way where people don't have to use, a backwards calculator as a physician, but to think longer, to think broader, not just the first paycheck, but to say, hey, what might be the better decision long term?
Right. Yeah, no, that's great advice.
So we're working on it, but thank you very much. Excellent advice, great stories, and a very interesting perspective. So thank you so much, Richard, for being on.
It's my pleasure, David.
And to everybody listening, as I've said before, we will be on in another 2 weeks with another great guest and topic. And if you are a physician who has an interesting story to tell or some advice you think you might impart to your fellow physicians, feel free to email me. I'm always looking for guests for later this season and for next season. So don't be afraid to reach out. And with that, thank you very much for listening. Tell all your colleagues, and look for another episode in 2 weeks.
Thanks for listening. The Wealth Planning for the Modern Physician podcast is brought to you by OJM Group, a multidisciplinary wealth management firm dedicated to helping physicians build and preserve their wealth while reducing taxes. Podcast listeners can get a free copy of our newest book. Simply text WPPOD to 844-418-1212 and click the link in the reply text to request your free print copy or ebook download. Be sure to join David for the next episode of the podcast. It's important to note that this content is for informational purposes only and does not represent personalized investment advice, as the information may not be suitable for your personal circumstances. Please contact your investment advisor before implementing any of the strategies discussed.